When we usually think about difficulty in video games, it usually revolves around a certain system that we are all too familiar with. Easy, medium, hard, and hardcore modes. Games generally allow the player to choose what difficulty they wish to play on, and also how difficult their experience will be. It generally boils down to how experienced a player is in a specific type of game, and therefore the player can just adjust the settings according to their personal skill level. Some games even support artificial difficulty, and what I mean by this is that an enemy may have tremendous amounts of health and damage on a higher difficulty, but are still the same stupid AI that you were playing with on easy mode. Developers sometimes do this to keep you playing the game for that little bit longer than you normally would be, and the fact that the difficulty is not organic or balanced means that the player may not have as much fun of an experience when playing on these higher difficulties. But when I think of organic difficulty in games, I usually tend to go to one game or franchise, and that franchise is the Soulsborne franchise. With all the games in the Soulsborne franchise, they are always regarded as being, well, the most difficult games ever created. People say this due to the fact that the bosses seem too powerful and the fact that you're not guided where to go or told what to do. But the fact that people say this makes the game hard, well, that's just not the case. The Soulsborne franchise is very clever in the way that it pursues difficulty. There is no easy, medium, hard or hardcore modes to choose from when it comes to the Soulsborne franchise. Instead, it's the same difficulty for everyone that plays it. As with every entry in the Soulsborne franchise, you start off the game by picking a class. You can be a mage, a warrior, or even a knight. Luckily, your class is interchangeable. You don't necessarily have to stick with the same class throughout your entire playthrough. And therefore, if you want to use some new spells or a new weapon on an enemy, you can do so. On the surface level, the Soulsborne games may seem to have generic combat. You lock onto an enemy, wait for them to attack, and then you land your killing blow, which is very reminiscent of late PS2 games and early PS3 games. Obviously, the formula has evolved over time, starting off with Demon Souls and recently Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, but each game in the franchise has evolved or expanded the formula presented in Demon Souls, which non-surprisingly has now become a cult classic, with the remaster soon to be releasing on the PlayStation 5. In the earliest sections of any of these games in the franchise, the enemies are obviously weaker in the earlier sections of the game. This is to teach you how combat works without necessarily holding your hand to show you. In the earliest sections of any of these games in the franchise, the enemies are obviously the weakest at the beginning of the game. This teaches you how the combat works without necessarily holding your hand to show you. And in these earlier sections of the games, you will find that the lock-on feature is quintessential to the structure of the combat system. Since the character doesn't necessarily move in the most fluid of ways in the Soulsborne franchise, the lock-on feature allows you to get a clean-cut angle on any enemy that you are intending of fighting, making sure that the enemy is always presented at the center of the screen so you know exactly where they are at all times, and therefore you cannot necessarily get caught off guard by an enemy unless the enemy are off screen. When an enemy takes its first attack towards you, in any other game it wouldn't necessarily be important, but in the Soulsborne franchise, it is one of the most important things in the entire game. And let me explain why. I made a video a few years ago about Dark Souls 3 being too easy, and I'm gonna briefly expand on that video because it's relevant to the topic at hand. I see the Soulsborne franchise as a rhythm game, and I don't mean like Guitar Hero or Rock Band. I mean that when you see an enemy attacking you, you need to remember that attack, or that attack pattern. Each enemy has their own specific attack pattern. Even if there are variations of the same type of enemy, they still might have differences in the way that they approach the player. This rings true for every boss in the Soulsborne franchise. Each boss only has a certain amount of moves that it can use against you. Everyone always says that bosses in Dark Souls or Demon Souls or Bloodborne are the most difficult part of the games, that they've been stuck on a boss for hours and hours and yet still can't seem to defeat a boss. I remember struggling at the very first boss, as I'm pretty sure many others did as well. And after many deaths, I came to the conclusion that each boss just has a specific moveset rather than being random. And when coming to this revelation, I started to understand the difficulty of the game. It's not too hard or unfair, it's subjective. If you engage in confrontations with any enemies in the Soulsborne franchise, you shouldn't be expecting to go in full guns blazing, because the likelihood is that you will fail in your pursuit of killing that enemy. The combat in Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne and Sekiro is methodical and calculated. If you take your time to learn an enemy's moveset, then your chances of killing that boss will be far greater than when you first entered the arena. Patience is the one thing that helps you progress in any of the Soulsborne games. Another factor in mind is another cog in the Soulsborne franchise that revolves around difficulty, and that's the environment. Environments are obviously important in every game that you play, because that's the place that you'll be face to face with and engrossed in for the next couple of days. Therefore, it holds a significant purpose in the way that the player interacts with it. In the Soulsborne games, you have a unique approach to the environment that you will be playing in. It's not open world, but it's semi-open world. You have areas that you can traverse freely, but they're not massively expansive. Dark Souls 1 is the exception to this, because it's technically an open world game, because everything is connected, it's just not in a linear fashion. Meaning it's more of an open world game than any of the others in the franchise, and after playing Dark Souls 3, I found it to be quite daunting when first playing Dark Souls Remastered. Most open world games in this fashion have waypoints or ways of telling the player where to go. The Soulsborne franchise doesn't do this. There is no minimap or waypoints. Instead, you have to ask NPCs what to do, and it doesn't help that they're ominously vague about it.
Are you the next monarch? Or merely a pawn of fate? Bearer of the curse?
I feel like this is one of the main reasons people are put off from playing the Soulsborne franchise. Since the objective isn't directly in the face of the player, they generally might not have the patience to go out and look for the objective. Many people may see this as lazy game design or a poorly structured story, but I see it as ingenious. Allowing the player to literally have to craft the pieces of the story together if they want to is a great way of presenting a story. They can piece it together through item, weapon and armor descriptions that give a glimpse to what all of these worlds used to be like before the events of the game. This way of approaching story and world design makes the game a wonder to explore. You're not held down by a story guiding you where to go, and if you're stuck, you can just go in a different direction. Instead of going up, you go down, and instead of going left, you go right. The player is there to make their own decisions. Obviously, not everything is left to the imagination, because you do have NPCs telling you certain hints to guide you into the right direction. It's not hard to find your objective in Dark Souls, Demon Souls or Bloodborne. You just have to learn your environments, all of the shortcuts, know how to hold your ground and know your enemy. Most environments, especially in the earlier entries of the Soulsborne franchise, are maze-like. They're very confusing, as since you are not guided where to go, you often get lost. But sometimes when getting lost, you find great items that can help you defeat your next boss. And then eventually you realise that getting lost and exploring these maze-like worlds actually may have some benefit to you. You may find items that give you a small little boost, or a new weapon that can provide much more damage. The Soulsborne games are not artificially hard. The game isn't necessarily out to get you. And what I mean by this is that the game isn't making enemies stronger or more powerful just to set you back to your bonfire. The enemies and the environments are all organic. There is nothing stopping you from overcoming a boss or an environment, apart from your willingness to learn the ropes and have the determination to keep on trying. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, then subscribe and turn on that notification button so you don't miss another upload from me. So thank you and goodbye.